Clara Weston's fist hit the wooden door one last time. Her knuckles were bleeding now, split from the cold and the pounding. Behind her, 3 small boys pressed together in the December wind, watching their mother beg. The door didn't open. "Please, Marcus." Her voice cracked. "He was your brother. These are his sons." Silence. Then footsteps moving away inside. That's when Clara understood. Family meant nothing when it cost something. Welcome to a story of survival, impossible choices, and the stranger who saw what blood refused to see. Stay with me until the end. Subscribe and comment what city you're watching from. I want to see how far this journey reaches. Head. Cowboy. The letter had promised everything. Clara pulled it from her pocket for the 100th time, though she knew every word by heart. Her husband's handwriting shaky from the fever that would kill him 3 weeks later. "If anything happens to me, go to Marcus. He's not warm, but he's fair. He'll see you right, Clara. He'll see our boys right." Will had believed it. Believed it enough to die peaceful, thinking his family would be safe. Will had been wrong about a lot of things. The silver strike that never came. The mining camp that took his lungs. The brother who now stood on the other side of a locked door, while his nephews shivered in the snow. "Mama!" Ezra's voice, her eldest 9 years old, and already carrying a man's weight in his eyes. "He's not coming back." Clara folded the letter carefully, tucked it against her chest, where the cold couldn't reach it. The last thing Will ever gave her. The last promise that had just shattered on a doorstep in Willow Creek, Colorado. "I know." She turned to face her sons. "We're going to be fine." The lie tasted like ash. They had traveled 300 miles to reach this moment. 300 miles of trains and wagons and walking when the money ran out. 300 miles of Clara rationing every bite so the boys would have enough. Now they stood in the main street of a town that didn't want them, and Clara had exactly $18 in her pocket. $18. 3 children. December in Colorado. And the sun already dropping toward the mountains like it couldn't wait to abandon them too. "I'm cold, Mama." Sam, her middle boy, pressed against her skirts. 6 years old and scared of everything since his father died. "Can we go inside somewhere?" Clara looked down the street. A general store with light in the windows. A boarding house with a no vacancy sign that might as well have said, "No hope." A church with its doors closed against the wind. "Soon, sweetheart. Let me think." But thinking required hope, and hope was getting harder to find. She'd tried the boarding house first before Marcus. The woman behind the counter had looked at Clara's worn dress, her 3 children the dust of travel, still on their shoes. "Full up." "I can pay. I have money." "Full up." The woman's eyes had slid away. "Try the church." The church was locked. The minister gone until Sunday, according to a note pinned to the door. 4 days away. 4 days might as well be 4 years when your children were shivering and the sky was promising snow. So Clara had gone to Marcus, her last hope. Her husband's own blood. And Marcus had spoken through the door without even opening it. "Will's mistakes died with him. You're not my problem." Mistakes. 3 beautiful boys, and Marcus called them mistakes. Clara had wanted to scream, to pound until her hands broke, to make him see what he was doing, what he was leaving them to face. But she'd learned something in the mining camps. Screaming never changed anything. Only action mattered, only moving forward. So she'd gathered her sons and walked away with her spine straight and her heart cracking into pieces. "Mama, that man's watching us." Ike, her youngest, 4 years old, and still innocent enough to notice things the others missed. Clara followed his pointing finger across the street. A figure stood in the shadows of the land office, motionless as the building itself. She couldn't see his face, only his outline. Tall, broad, still in a way that suggested he'd been watching for a while. Clara's hand tightened on Sam's shoulder. In the mining camps, watching men meant danger. Men who watched and calculated and waited for women alone. "Stay close to me." She kept her voice steady. All of you. But there was nowhere to go. That was the terrible mathematics of their situation. The street stretched in both directions and every door on it had already closed. The watching man moved. He stepped off the boardwalk and crossed the street with an easy stride, like a man who owned the ground he walked on. As he passed through the light from the general store's windows, Clara got her first real look at him. 40, maybe older. Face like weathered leather lines around eyes that had squinted into too many suns and too many sorrows. Dark hair going gray at the temples. A jaw that hadn't seen a razor in days, maybe longer. He wasn't handsome. He was something else. Solid. Present. The kind of man who looked like he could stop a storm by standing in front of it. Evening. His voice was gravel smoothed by water, quiet enough that Clara had to lean in to hear it. Storm's coming in hard tonight. You folks got shelter. We're managing. The words came out automatic, the defensive wall she'd built over months of mining camp survival. Something shifted in the man's expression. Not offense. Recognition. Respectfully, ma'am, you're not. He looked at the boys, then back at her. Boarding house is full if they told you that. Church is locked. And whoever's behind that door you were knocking on isn't coming out. Clara's breath caught. He'd seen. He'd been watching long enough to see her beg at Marcus's door. What business is it of yours? None. Simple. Honest. But that storm's going to drop 2 feet of snow and temperatures cold enough to kill before midnight. And I've got an empty cabin with a good roof, a working stove, and beds enough for your boys. Every instinct screamed warnings. Strange men and isolated cabins, and her children's safety dependent on a stranger's goodwill. But competing against those warnings was simple arithmetic. 3 boys. Falling temperature. No alternatives. What do you want in exchange? The question came out hard, demanding. Clara watched his face for the flinch, for the calculation, for the flicker of something dark beneath the surface. Instead, something tired crossed his features, like he'd expected the question and found it depressing anyway. Nothing tonight. You'd be doing me a favor, actually. Cabin's been empty since my foreman moved on. Empty buildings deteriorate faster than occupied ones. He paused. Tomorrow, if you're interested, we can talk about work. I need someone to teach the ranch children their letters. Someone who can read and write. I can read and write? I figured. He almost smiled. Woman who carries a letter in her pocket and reads it like it's scripture usually can. He'd noticed that too. Clara wasn't sure whether to be impressed or afraid. I'm Silas Harding. Stonebrook Ranch, about 3 miles northeast. He gestured vaguely into the darkness. The offer stands until you accept, or that storm kills you. Your choice. Later, Clara would wonder what made her decide. The practicality of his words, maybe. The absence of promises and reassurances. Most men trying to manipulate would have been earnest, full of pledges they had no intention of keeping. Silas Harding just sounded tired and practical. Ezra. She kept her voice steady. Get your brothers. The wagon ride passed in near silence. Silas had pulled a canvas cover over them before they started protection against the sleet that had begun to fall. The boys huddled into the wagon bed, exhausted enough that even the jolting couldn't keep them awake. Clara sat on the bench beside Silas, maintaining careful distance, watching darkness beyond the reach of the wagon's lantern. Your husband passed, Silas asked after the first mile, his voice pitched low. 8 months ago. Mining accident in Montana. And you traveled all this way for family that wouldn't open a door. It wasn't a question. Clara answered anyway. My husband's brother. He said he'd help. Marcus Weston. Still not a question. I know him. Know of him anyway. Man's got a reputation for being exactly what you found tonight. Clara felt something loosen in her chest. The simple acknowledgement free of pity or advice. How did you know we were family? You were standing outside the general store with 3 boys, $18, and no plan. Silas shifted the reins slightly. That's not anything. That's everything just fell apart. And the way you were watching the street, you weren't looking for help. You were calculating survival. Clara turned to look at him directly for the first time. Why help us? The question hung in the cold air between them. 15 years ago, I needed help I didn't know how to ask for. His voice went rough. Someone offered it anyway. Didn't make a thing of it. Just did what needed doing. Figure I owe that forward. He glanced at her briefly. Also wasn't lying about the cabin deteriorating. And I do need a teacher, but mostly couldn't walk past 3 boys about to spend a bad night in a worse place and pretend I didn't see it. The ranch appeared gradually. Fence lines first, then outbuildings, then the main house, solid and well-kept, lamplight glowing in windows like promises. Silas guided the wagon past the main house to a smaller cabin set back among pine trees. Foreman's cabin. He climbed down. Give me a minute to get the stove going. He disappeared inside while Clara helped the boys down from the wagon. They stood in a small cluster, Ike clinging to her skirts. All of them too tired and overwhelmed to do more than wait. Through the open door she could see Silas moving efficiently, lighting lamps, feeding kindling into a stove, adjusting dampers. All right. He reappeared in the doorway. Should be warming up shortly. The cabin was simple but solid. One main room with a cooking area, a separate small bedroom, everything clean and bare. Silas had already pulled blankets from a chest and laid them across 2 narrow beds. Boys can take the bedroom. You can have the main room. There's a bolt on the inside of the door. He met her eyes directly. Mrs. Brennan, my housekeeper, will come by first thing with breakfast. She'll knock loud. Clara nodded, trying to process the swift change in their circumstances. 6 hours ago, they'd been standing outside Marcus's door. Now they had shelter heat the promise of breakfast. Mr. Harding, she began. Silas. He moved toward the door. And you don't need to thank me tonight. Get your boys warm. Tomorrow we'll talk about the rest. He paused at the threshold. You're safe here, Mrs. Weston. Whatever you're worried about, you're safe. This is a working ranch with good people on it. Nobody's going to bother you or your boys. After he left, Clara stood in the center of the cabin, listening to the stove tick as it heated. Behind her, the boys had already claimed the bedroom, their voices soft with wonder at having beds again. She walked to the small window, the main house lamplight still glowing. Silas's silhouette passed briefly across one of the windows. Mama! Ezra appeared at her elbow, worry creasing his young face. Are we staying here? Clara put her hand on her son's shoulder. The bones were too sharp, evidence of too many meals stretched too thin. I don't know yet, sweetheart, but we're safe tonight. That's enough for now. But even as she said it, Clara wondered. What did Silas Harding really want? Why would a stranger offer so much to people who had nothing to give? In her experience, kindness always came with a price. She just hadn't learned yet what this one would cost. Morning arrived with 3 sharp knocks and a woman's brisk voice. Mrs. Weston, I'm Maddie Brennan. Got breakfast here and it's getting cold. Clara, who'd been awake since first light, hurried to open the door. The woman on the porch was perhaps 58, built solid with steel gray hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun, and eyes that assessed everything in a single sweep. Boys still sleeping. She didn't wait for an answer, just pushed past with a covered basket that smelled of bacon and fresh bread. Good. Let them rest. You and I need to talk. She set the basket on the small table, began unpacking with efficient movements. Plates, napkins, jars of preserves, a pot of coffee still steaming. Sit. It was a command. Clara sat. Maddie poured 2 cups of coffee, pushed one across the table, and settled into the opposite chair with the air of someone prepared to conduct an interrogation. Silas told me your situation. Husband dead. Brother-in-law's a bastard, pardon my language. 3 boys and $18 between you and the poorhouse. Her eyes were sharp. That about cover it? Yes. Good. I appreciate a woman who doesn't waste time on pride when facts need sorting. Maddie sipped her coffee. Here's what you need to know about Silas Harding. He's fair, he's honest, and he's got a tendency to help people who can't find help anywhere else. She paused. But he's not running a charity, and he won't respect you if you try to play helpless. You want to stay here, you work. I understand. Can you cook? Yes. Clean, mend. Manage a household. I've done all of those. Maddie nodded slowly. Silas mentioned you can read and write. That true, or was he being optimistic? I taught school for 4 years before I married. Something like satisfaction crossed the older woman's features. Well, that changes things considerably. She leaned forward. We've got 6 ranch families with children. Youngest is 4, oldest is 11. They need teaching, and the nearest school is in Willow Creek, too far for daily travel, especially in winter. You could teach them here, 3 days a week. Silas would pay fair wages. Clara felt her heart accelerate. He's offering me a job. I'm offering you a job. Silas will agree because it solves a problem he's been working on for 2 years. Maddie's voice sharpened. But understand this. It's not charity. You'll work for your wages. You'll teach those children properly. And you'll contribute in other ways too, helping with meals, mending, whatever needs doing. She stood. In exchange, you and your boys get this cabin, wages enough to save, and a place in this community if you want it. But you earn it. Clear. Clear. Clara met her eyes directly. And yes, I want the work. Good. Maddie gathered her things. Silas will be back around noon to discuss particulars. Until then, settle in. Get your bearings. She paused at the door. One more thing, Mrs. Weston. Whatever you're thinking about, why Silas helped you, whatever worst case you're running in your head, stop. He lost his wife and baby 15 years ago to scarlet fever. He blamed himself for being gone when it happened. Been alone ever since building this ranch and helping people because he couldn't save the one person who mattered. Her voice softened slightly. He's not looking for anything from you except honest work and basic decency. That's more than fair. Don't make it complicated. After she left, Clara sat alone in the warming cabin, listening to her sons begin to stir in the bedroom. Through the window, she could see the ranch spreading out in morning light. Pastures, outbuildings, the solid presence of the main house, not charity, work and wages and dignity. For the first time since Will died, Clara felt something other than the grinding necessity of survival. She felt possibility. But even possibility came with questions. Why had Silas Harding really helped them? What had he seen when he watched her from across the street? And what would happen when he discovered that Clara Weston was keeping secrets of her own? The answers would come. They always did. Clara just hoped she was strong enough to face them when they arrived. Silas returned just after noon, riding a bay gelding that looked as practical and well-kept as everything else on the ranch. Clara watched him through the window, noting the way he moved, efficient, unhurried, a man who had learned that patience accomplished more than speed. He knocked once before entering, removing his hat as he stepped inside. Mrs. Brennan said you talked. We did. And you're interested in the teaching position? Yes. Clara had prepared words about gratitude and commitment, but Silas's directness made them seem unnecessary. All right, here's what I'm thinking. He remained standing, hat in his hands. 3 days a week teaching. Monday, Wednesday, Friday. 8 until 2 with a break for lunch. Reading, writing, arithmetic, whatever else you think they need. I provide supplies. Wages are $30 a month. $30. In the mining camps, Clara had struggled to make 10 last a month. In addition, Silas continued, you help Mrs. Brennan with household tasks on your non-teaching days. Cooking, mending, general work. That's another 20 a month. So 50 total plus this cabin at no cost plus provisions from the ranch stores. $50 a month. Clara did the mathematics automatically. In 6 months, she could save enough to have real choices. In a year, she could be independent. There's one more thing. Something shifted in Silas's tone. Your boy Ezra. He's 9. Yes. Old enough to work if he wants to. Not hard labor, light ranch work. Helping with chickens, collecting eggs, feeding stock. I'd pay him $5 a month, same as I pay the other boys who help around here. Clara felt her throat tighten. He was offering Ezra dignity, a chance to contribute instead of just being another mouth to feed. He'd like that. Her voice came out rough. Thank you. It's not charity. Silas met her eyes. I need the help and he'll earn every penny. But I want you to know your boys are welcome here. All of them. They can attend your school when you start teaching. They can play with the other children. They can just be children for a while. He moved toward the door. Mrs. Brennan will help you set up for teaching. First class starts Monday, gives you a few days to prepare. Mr. Harding, he paused. Why? Clara needed to understand. You don't know me. You don't know if I can actually teach, if I'm trustworthy, if I'll stay or disappear with whatever I can carry. Why take this risk? Silas was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes unreadable. Because 15 years ago, someone took a risk on me when I had nothing to offer but my word. And I've spent every day since then trying to be worth that trust. He put his hat back on. You've got the same look in your eyes that I had back then. Like you're one bad break from losing everything, but you're not going to let that stop you from fighting. He opened the door. Monday morning, 8 o'clock. Don't be late. After he left, Clara stood in the center of the cabin processing everything. The wages, the opportunity, the strange, quiet man who offered help without asking for anything except honest work in return. Mama. Ezra appeared in the bedroom doorway. Was that Mr. Harding? Yes. What did he want? Clara looked at her son, this serious boy, who had carried too much responsibility for too long. He offered me a job teaching school, and he offered you a job too if you want it, working on the ranch. Ezra's eyes widened. A real job with real pay. $5 a month. $5? He said it like it was a fortune. To him it probably was. Mama, can I please? Clara pulled him close, feeling his thin arms wrap around her waist. Yes, sweetheart. You can. She didn't tell him about the weight that lifted from her chest. Didn't tell him that for the first time in 8 months, she could imagine a future that wasn't just survival. Some things a mother kept to herself. The first week passed in a blur of preparation and adjustment. Mrs. Brennan Maddie, as she insisted Clara call her, proved to be exactly what she'd appeared: efficient, fair, and utterly intolerant of laziness or self-pity. She put Clara to work immediately, teaching her the rhythms of the ranch household, the preferences of the hands who took meals in the main house, the particular requirements of Silas's quiet, ordered life. Man likes his coffee strong, his meals on time, and his house peaceful, Maddie explained as they worked together in the main house kitchen. He's not fussy, but he appreciates things done right. And he notices when they're not. Clara learned quickly. She learned that the ranch ran on a precise schedule: breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, supper at sunset. She learned the names and faces of the ranch hands: Old Joe, the graying cowboy who'd been with Silas for 20 years, Thomas and Henry Caldwell brothers from Kansas who handled the cattle, and a rotating crew of seasonal workers who came and went with the weather. She learned that Silas took his meals with the hands most days, sitting at the long table in the kitchen, listening more than he talked. And she learned that Stonebrook Ranch was more than just a cattle operation. It was a community. The families Maddie had mentioned lived in small houses scattered across the property. The Hendersons with 3 children, the Cartwrights with 4, the Daltons with 2, all of them employees, all of them dependent on the ranch's success. All of them treating Silas with a respect that seemed earned rather than demanded. On Friday, 3 days before her first teaching session, Clara walked to each family's home to introduce herself and assess the children's current education. What she found was both encouraging and challenging. Bright children eager to learn, but wildly varied in their abilities. The oldest Henderson boy could read at a 7th grade level. The youngest Cartwright couldn't recognize letters. You've got your work cut out for you, Mrs. Henderson said with a sympathetic smile. But we're grateful for the opportunity. These children need proper education if they're going to have choices in life. That evening, Clara sat at the small table in her cabin, working by lamplight to create a teaching plan. Ezra sat across from her practicing his own letters his father had taught him to read, but his writing needed work. Sam and Ike were already asleep, worn out from a day spent exploring the ranch under Old Joe's tolerant supervision. A knock at the door startled her. She opened it to find Silas standing in the winter darkness, a wooden crate in his arms. "Books," he said simply. "For the school. Mrs. Brennan mentioned you'd need them." He set the crate inside, and Clara knelt beside it, examining the contents with wonder. McGuffey readers. Arithmetic primers. A worn copy of Robinson Crusoe. Geography texts. Even a small globe. "Where did these come from?" Silas shrugged. "Been collecting them for a few years, thinking eventually we'd get a teacher out here. Some I bought, some I traded for. Use whatever helps." Clara lifted the geography text, feeling its weight, its promise. This is generous, more than generous. It's practical. But his voice carried warmth beneath the dismissal. "Can't run a ranch forever on men who can't read or calculate. Investment in the children is investment in the ranch's future." He moved toward the door, then paused. "You settling in all right? Boys doing okay?" "We're doing well. Better than I expected." "Good." After he left, Clara sat with the books spread around her, Ezra watching with sleepy curiosity. "Mama," he asked, "is Mr. Harding, is he a good man?" Clara thought about the question, about everything she'd observed in the past week, about the way Silas treated his workers, his careful distance, his quiet generosity. "I think so, sweetheart. I think he might be one of the best men I've ever met." "Better than Pa?" The question hit harder than Clara expected. She looked at her son, at the uncertainty in his eyes, and chose her words carefully. "Different than Pa. Your father loved us with everything he had. But he was always looking for something better, something more. Mr. Harding seems like he's already found what he wants. He just stays, builds, keeps his promises." Ezra nodded slowly, something settling in his young face. "I like that. I like people who stay." Monday morning arrived cold and clear. Clara woke before dawn, nervous energy making sleep impossible. She'd spent the weekend transforming one of the ranch's unused storage sheds into a classroom, cleaning, arranging benches, setting up a makeshift blackboard. By 8 o'clock, 9 children sat before her, ranging in age from 4 to 11, their faces showing varying degrees of interest and apprehension. "Good morning." Clara stood before them, feeling the weight of responsibility. "My name is Mrs. Weston, and I'm going to be your teacher. Some of you are already good readers. Some of you are just learning your letters. That's all right. We're going to work together, help each other, and by spring, every one of you will know how to read, write, and calculate." The oldest Henderson boy, Daniel, 12 years old, and already showing his father's stubborn jaw, raised his hand. "Yes, Daniel. My pa says you came from Montana. Says you got 3 boys and no husband. Says Mr. Harding took you in when your own family wouldn't." The other children watched with interest, waiting to see how she'd respond. Clara met Daniel's eyes directly. "That's all true. My husband died in a mining accident. I came here hoping family would help, and they wouldn't. Mr. Harding offered me shelter and honest work. Everything I have here I'm earning, just like your parents earn what they have." She paused. "Any other questions about my personal life, or can we start learning?" Daniel's cheeks flushed, but he shook his head. "Good. Now, Daniel, since you're the oldest, come up here and read from this primer. Show me what you know." The morning passed quickly, consumed by assessment and organization. By lunch, Clara had a clear picture of each child's abilities and a plan for grouping them effectively. After the children left, she sat alone in the quiet classroom, feeling the particular exhaustion and satisfaction that came from hard work done well. "How'd it go?" Silas appeared in the doorway, his presence filling the small space. "Well, I think. They're good children, eager to learn." Daniel Henderson give you trouble, he can be direct. Clara smiled. He asked direct questions. I gave direct answers. We understood each other. Something like approval crossed Silas's features. That's the way to handle it. These kids respect honesty. Try to soft soap them, and they'll eat you alive. He paused. You need anything? Supplies, different arrangements. No, you and Mrs. Brennan have provided everything I need. All right then. He turned to leave, then stopped. Clara, you did good today. The parents are already talking about how organized you are, how you treated their children with respect. That matters out here. The use of her first name registered, as did the genuine warmth in his voice. Thank you, Silas. After he left, Clara sat in the empty classroom processing the day. 1 week ago, she'd been standing outside Marcus's door holding $18 and 3 frightened children. Now she had a home, wages, work that mattered, and most surprisingly, the respect of people who had no reason to give it beyond what she earned. For the first time since Will died, she felt something other than grief when she thought of him. She felt gratitude for the love they'd shared, for the sons he'd given her, even for the letter that had brought her here. Maybe this was what second chances looked like. Not dramatic rescue, but quiet opportunity. Not salvation, but simple fairness from someone who understood that most people just needed a chance to prove what they could do. The weeks settled into rhythm. Teaching consumed Clara's mornings 3 days a week, household work filled the gaps, and slowly, almost imperceptibly, the ranch began to feel like home. Ezra had taken to ranch work with an enthusiasm that made Clara's heart ache. Old Joe had claimed him as a sort of apprentice, teaching him to handle chickens' muck stalls carry water. The $5 Silas paid him each month went into a tin can under his bed, counted and recounted with the seriousness of a banker. Saving for something? Clara asked one evening. In case. Ezra's answer was simple, devastating. In case this ended. In case they had to run again. In case safety proved temporary, as it always had before. Clara didn't tell him to stop saving. She just worked harder to prove they wouldn't need to run. By mid-January, the children had made remarkable progress. Even the youngest Cartwright could recognize letters and sound out simple words. Daniel Henderson was reading at a level that would challenge students twice his age. And all of them had learned something perhaps more valuable than academics they'd learned to help each other. You've built something good here, Maddie said one afternoon as they worked together in the kitchen. Those children don't just learn from you, they trust you. Clara shaped bread dough with practiced hands. I just treat them like I'd want someone to treat my boys. That's rarer than you think. Maddie slid loaves into the oven. Most teachers come from back east with fancy ideas about civilization and improvement. They look at ranch children like they're something to be fixed. These children aren't broken. They're just learning in a different context. Exactly. Maddie's sharp eyes held approval. Silas said you'd understand that. Said you had the sense to see what was in front of you instead of what you expected to see. The mention of Silas made Clara pause. Over the weeks, she'd become aware of his presence in ways that concerned her. He was everywhere on the ranch, checking fence lines, working with the hands, managing endless details. But he also appeared at odd moments. In the classroom doorway with more supplies. At the cabin with firewood, he'd split himself. In the kitchen, eating meals while the hands talked around him. He watched her. She'd noticed. Not in any threatening way, but with careful attention, making sure she was managing. Making sure the boys were settling. Silas has been good to us, Clara said carefully. More than fair. Silas is a good man. Maddie's voice carried absolute certainty. But he's also a lonely one, though he'd never admit it. This ranch is his life, has been for 16 years. But a ranch isn't company, and work isn't comfort. Before Clara could respond, the kitchen door opened and Silas himself appeared, stamping snow from his boots. Getting bad out there, he said without preamble. Storm's coming in hard. Mrs. Brennan, you should stay in the guest room tonight rather than try for your cabin. Clara, you and the boys are fine where you are, but don't try to come to the main house until it clears." "The children?" Clara said immediately. "They can't walk home in this." "Already handled. Kids are staying in the bunkhouse tonight. Old Joe's telling them stories and feeding them supper." Relief washed through Clara. "Thank you." Silas shrugged, brushing snow from his hat. "Just practical. Can't have children freezing." But his eyes met hers with something that had nothing to do with practicality, and Clara felt something shift in her chest. A recognition she wasn't ready to examine. The storm lasted 2 days, burying the ranch under 18 inches of snow. Clara and her boys stayed in their cabin warm and safe while outside, the world turned white and wild. On the second afternoon, when the snow finally stopped and weak sunlight broke through, a knock came at the door. Silas stood on the porch snow, clinging to his coat, his breath fogging in the cold air. "Wanted to check on you, make sure you had everything you needed." "We're fine. The stove kept us warm." He hesitated, and Clara understood why. In 6 weeks, he'd never entered her cabin beyond the doorway, always maintained that careful distance between employer and employee. "Just for coffee," she said quietly, "to warm up before you head back." He came in, moving carefully in the small space. The boys were in the bedroom playing some game involving Ezra's precious saved coins. Clara poured coffee, handed him a cup. "You didn't have to walk all this way. Wanted to make sure you were managing." He wrapped his hands around the cup. They were raw with cold, the knuckles split from work and weather. "Storm like that, things can go wrong fast." "We're managing, more than managing." Clara paused. "Silas, I need to ask you something." "Ask?" "Are you satisfied with my work? With the teaching the household help? Because if there's anything—" "You're doing fine." The answer came immediately. "Better than fine. The children are learning, the parents are happy. Mrs. Brennan says you work harder than anyone she's known." He studied her face. "Why are you asking?" Clara traced the rim of her cup, trying to articulate the fear that had been building despite all evidence to the contrary. "Because this has been good. Too good, maybe. And I keep waiting for the moment it falls apart, when you decide we're more trouble than we're worth." "Stop." Silas's voice was gentle but firm. "Listen to me. You're not trouble. You've earned every penny I've paid you, and more. Your boys are good boys who work hard and don't cause problems." He set down his cup, met her eyes directly. "I don't know what kind of promises men made you before, what kind of security you lost when your husband died. But I'm telling you plain, as long as you want to be here, as long as you do the work, you have a place on this ranch. That's not charity. That's business. And it's also the truth." Clara felt her throat tighten with emotion she couldn't name. "Thank you for saying that. I always mean what I say." He stood, reaching for his hat. "Storm's cleared enough. I should check the other families." After he left, Clara sat alone with her cooling coffee, processing the conversation. The promise he'd made. The way his presence seemed to fill spaces even after he'd gone. Maddie's words echoed in her mind. He's a good man, but he's also a lonely one. She thought about Will, about the love they'd shared that had been real, but never easy. Will had been restless, always chasing the next opportunity, the next promise of prosperity that never materialized. She'd loved him, but she'd never felt safe with him. Not truly. Safety required more than love. It required steadiness, reliability, the kind of solid presence that didn't shift with circumstances. The kind of presence Silas Harding embodied in every action, every word, every quiet promise kept. It was dangerous, she realized, to compare a dead husband to a living employer. Dangerous and unfair to both men. But the comparison came anyway, unbidden and insistent. And Clara wasn't sure what to do about the feelings that came with it. February brought deeper cold, but also a kind of settling. The ranch rhythms became familiar, comfortable. Clara's teaching flourished, her household work earned consistent praise, and her boys thrived in ways she'd stopped hoping for. Ezra had grown an inch, his face losing the pinched look of hunger. Sam had stopped asking every morning if they'd have to leave. And Ike had adopted one of the ranch cats, carrying it everywhere, with a 4-year-old's fierce devotion. But February also brought something else. Reverend Elijah Crane. He arrived in Willow Creek on the third Sunday of the month, the new minister for the town's small church. Clara heard about him from Maddie, who heard about him from town gossip, who heard about him from everyone. Young, Maddie reported with a sniff, full of fire and brimstone, already making noise about moral standards and proper behavior. Clara didn't think much of it until the first Sunday she took the boys to church. Reverend Crane was perhaps 35, handsome in a sharp-edged way, with pale eyes that seemed to see sin everywhere they looked. His sermon was about the dangers of improper association, the importance of reputation, the way good Christians must guard against even the appearance of wrongdoing. Clara felt his gaze land on her more than once. After the service, as she gathered her boys to leave, he intercepted her. "Mrs. Weston, isn't it?" His voice was smooth, concerned. "The widow from Montana." "Yes." "I've heard about your situation, living at Stonebrook Ranch, teaching the children there." He shook his head slowly. "It must be difficult. A woman alone dependent on the charity of a single man." "It's not charity." Clara kept her voice level. "I work for my wages, same as any employee." Of course. But his smile didn't reach his eyes. "Still, you must understand how it appears. A young widow, 3 children living on the property of an unmarried man. People talk, Mrs. Weston, and talk can be damaging." Clara felt ice form in her stomach. "What exactly are you suggesting, Reverend?" "Only that perhaps alternative arrangements might be more appropriate. There are respectable families in town who might take you in. As a housekeeper, perhaps. Somewhere your reputation could be better protected." Clara looked at this man, this stranger who presumed to judge her situation without knowing anything about it. "My reputation is my own concern, Reverend, and my current arrangement is perfectly respectable. Mr. Harding has been nothing but honorable." "I'm sure that's true." Crane's smile turned pitying. "But honor isn't always enough to silence wagging tongues. Think about it, Mrs. Weston, for your children's sake, if not your own." He moved away before she could respond, leaving Clara standing in the church aisle with her sons clustered around her and a cold knot of dread forming in her chest. She knew how this worked. She'd seen it in the mining camps. One person with authority starting whispers. Whispers becoming rumors. Rumors becoming certainty. And suddenly, a woman's reputation was destroyed, her livelihood threatened, her children's futures damaged, all because someone decided that propriety mattered more than truth. "Mama." Ezra tugged her hand. "What did that man want?" Clara forced a smile. "Nothing important, sweetheart. Let's go home." But it was important. She knew that even as she said it. And she knew that Reverend Crane wasn't finished. The first sign came a week later. Mrs. Henderson, one of the ranch families, mentioned that a friend from town had asked pointed questions about Clara's living situation. Then Mr. Cartwright reported similar inquiries at the general store. By the end of February, Clara could feel the shift. People in town who'd been friendly now looked at her sideways. Conversation stopped when she entered the general store. And the whispers, she couldn't hear them, but she could feel them like cold water down her spine. Maddie noticed. Of course she did. "Crane's been busy," the older woman said grimly one morning, spreading his version of Christian concern all over town, making sure everyone knows about the widow living in sin at Stonebrook Ranch. "There's no sin involved." Clara's voice was tight. "Silas has been completely proper. Doesn't matter to people like Crane. Truth isn't the point. Control is the point." Maddie's jaw set hard. "Does Silas know?" "No. I haven't told him." "Why not?" Clara was quiet for a moment. "Because if he knows, he might feel obligated to do something about it. And I don't want him to feel obligated. I don't want—" She stopped. "You don't want him to offer something out of duty instead of choice." Clara met Maddie's knowing eyes. "Is it that obvious?" "Child, it's been obvious for weeks. To everyone except apparently you and Silas, who are both too stubborn to admit what's plain as day." Before Clara could respond, the kitchen door opened. Silas entered, his expression dark in a way Clara had never seen. "Someone want to tell me why Reverend Crane just rode out here to express his concerns about moral standards on my ranch?" Clara felt her stomach drop. Silas's eyes found hers. "He suggested I should find you employment elsewhere, for everyone's reputation. Said several upstanding families in town would take you in." "What did you tell him?" Silas's jaw tightened. "I told him that what happens on my ranch is none of his damn business, that you're my employee and a fine teacher, and that if he had evidence of actual wrongdoing he should present it, and if he didn't, he should stop spreading lies." He moved closer, his voice dropping. "I told him that the next time he showed up on my property questioning my honor or yours, I'd escort him off at gunpoint." Clara stared at him. "You threatened a minister." "I stated a fact." But something in his expression shifted a crack in the wall he usually kept so carefully maintained. "Clara, why didn't you tell me this was happening?" "Because I thought I could handle it. Because I didn't want to make trouble." "You're not trouble." The words came out rough, almost angry. "How many times do I have to say it? You're not trouble. You're—" He stopped himself, turned away, ran a hand through his hair. "You're important," he finished quietly. "To this ranch. To those children. To another stop. I won't let some self-righteous fool destroy what you've built here because he's decided appearances matter more than reality." Maddie had quietly slipped out of the kitchen, leaving them alone. Clara took a breath. "Silas, what Crane is suggesting about us is nonsense. Is it?" The question hung in the air between them. Silas turned back to face her, his dark eyes unreadable. "What are you asking me?" Clara felt her heart pounding, but she'd spent too long being careful, being afraid. "I'm asking if there's any truth to what he's implying. Not the sin part, I know there isn't. But the rest of it. The feelings he's assuming exist." Silas was very still. "And if there were, then maybe we should talk about it, instead of pretending it isn't there." For a long moment, neither of them moved. Clara could hear the clock ticking on the wall, could hear her own pulse in her ears, could feel the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Every kindness, every careful distance, every look that lasted a second too long. "Not here," Silas said finally. "Not like this with Crane's poison in the air. If we're going to talk about that, it should be on our terms, not because some minister forced our hand." Clara nodded slowly. "All right. But Clara—" He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the flecks of gold in his brown eyes. "Whatever happens with Crane, whatever gossip spreads, you're staying. You and your boys. I'll fight the whole damn town if I have to, but you're not leaving because some fool decided to make your life difficult." He held her gaze for a moment longer, something raw and unguarded in his expression. Then he turned and walked out, leaving Clara standing in the kitchen with her heart racing and her world fundamentally shifted. Whatever they'd been pretending didn't exist, couldn't be pretended away anymore. And Clara wasn't sure if that terrified her or thrilled her. Maybe both. The conversation they'd promised each other didn't happen that week, or the next. March arrived with the kind of chaos that made personal matters impossible. Henry Caldwell's horse spooked at a snake threw him hard, and the young cowboy's leg broke in 2 places. The doctor from Willow Creek said it warned them about infection and left instructions that required round-the-clock attention. Clara found herself pulled into the crisis without question. She sat with Henry through the night shifts when Thomas, his brother, needed sleep. She changed bandages, forced liquids, watched for fever with the practiced eye of a woman who'd seen too many mining camp injuries. Silas was everywhere during those first terrible days, organizing the hands to cover Henry's work, making sure the ranch didn't fall apart while its people focused on saving one of their own. "You should rest," he told Clara on the 3rd night, finding her in the main house kitchen preparing broth. "You've been up for 18 hours. So have you. I'm used to it. So am I." Clara looked up from the pot, saw the exhaustion carved into his face. "Mining camps taught me that sleep is a luxury when someone's life hangs in the balance." Silas moved closer, took the spoon from her hand. "Let me. You sit." "I'm fine. You're swaying on your feet." His voice was gentle but firm. "Sit down, Clara. Please." She sat, watched him stir the broth with the same careful attention he gave everything. In the lamplight, the silver at his temples showed more than usual. The lines around his eyes seemed deeper. "He's going to make it," Clara said quietly. "The fever's not setting in. His color's good." "I know." Silas didn't look up from the pot. "But I've been here before, watching someone fight for their life, wondering if this time would be the time I lost." Clara understood he wasn't talking about Henry anymore. "Tell me about her," she said softly. "Your wife." Silas's hand stilled on the spoon. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, "Maggie." Her name was Margaret, but everyone called her Maggie. She was 23 when we married. I was 26, and thought I knew everything about building a life. He resumed stirring, but his movements were mechanical now. "We had 3 years together. Good years. Then she got pregnant, and I got offered a cattle drive that would pay enough to expand the ranch. 6 weeks away. She asked me not to go. But you went." "I went. Told her we needed the money. Told her she was worrying over nothing. Told her I'd be back before anything happened." His voice roughened. "She was dead 2 weeks later. Scarlet fever. The baby with her. They'd been gone for days before I even knew she was sick." Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "Silas, I'm sorry." 16 years ago." He said it like the time should have made it hurt less. "And I still wake up some nights thinking I hear her calling. Still carry the guilt of not being there. Still wonder if I could have saved her if I'd just listened instead of deciding I knew better." He finally looked at Clara, his dark eyes raw with old pain. "That's why I helped you. That night in Willow Creek. I saw a woman with children who needed someone to do the right thing, and I thought about Maggie. Thought about how she died alone because I chose money over presents. And I couldn't walk past you without offering what I should have given her." Clara rose from her chair, moved to stand beside him. "You couldn't have known." "Maybe, but I still made the choice. And she still died because of it." "She died because of a fever, not because of you." Silas shook his head slowly. "I appreciate what you're trying to do. But I've had 16 years to think about this. I know what I'm responsible for." Clara reached out, touched his arm. He went still under her hand. "Then let me tell you what I see," she said quietly. "I see a man who took that guilt and turned it into something good, who built a ranch that takes care of people instead of just using them, who saw a desperate woman and her children and offered help without expecting anything in return." She squeezed his arm gently. "Maggie's death was a tragedy. But what you've done since then, the lives you've touched, the people you've helped, that's not guilt anymore, Silas. That's grace." He looked at her for a long moment, something shifting in his expression. Then he covered her hand with his own, his calloused palm warm against her skin. "Clara, I need to tell you something." "Tell me." "These past months watching you work, watching you build something with those children, watching you raise your boys with so much courage." He paused, struggling for words. "I started feeling things I told myself I'd never feel again. Things I don't know what to do with." Clara's heart was pounding. "What kind of things?" "The kind that make a man want to come home at the end of the day. The kind that make him notice when someone's not in the room. The kind that—" A crash from upstairs. Henry's voice confused and calling out. They pulled apart as Thomas came running down the stairs. "He's thrashing. Fever's spiking. I need help." The moment shattered. Clara and Silas moved together, crisis taking over personal confessions, buried under the immediate need to save a young man's life. Henry's fever raged for 2 more days. Clara barely left his bedside, forcing fluids, applying cool compresses, talking to him through his delirium. Silas came and went, managing the ranch during the day, taking night shifts so Clara could rest. They didn't speak again about what he'd started to say in the kitchen. There wasn't time. There wasn't space. There was only Henry's labored breathing and the desperate fight to keep infection from taking hold. On the 5th day, the fever broke. Clara was there when Henry's eyes opened lucid for the first time since the crisis began. "Mrs. Weston." His voice was barely a whisper. "I'm here, Henry. You're going to be all right." Thought I was dying. He swallowed hard. "Kept seeing my ma. She passed when I was 12. Your ma will have to wait. You're not going anywhere yet." The boss. Henry's eyes searched the room. He stayed. He barely left. None of us did. Tears slid down Henry's temples. Never had nobody care like that before. Me and Thomas, we've been on our own since we were kids. Nobody ever... He couldn't finish. "You've got people now," Clara said gently. "A whole ranch full of them." Silas appeared in the doorway, drawn by the sound of voices. When he saw Henry awake and coherent relief flooded his features so completely that Clara glimpsed past his careful control to the man underneath. "Welcome back," Silas said quietly. "You scared us." "Sorry, boss." "Don't apologize, just get well." Silas moved to the bedside. "And Henry, when you're back on your feet, I want to talk to you and Thomas about something. Been thinking about expanding the cattle operation. Need men I can trust to help manage it. Might be interested in a partnership arrangement." Henry stared at him. "Partnership? But we're just hands. We don't have... We'll work out the details when you're stronger. For now, just know you've got a future here if you want it." After Henry drifted back to sleep. Real sleep this time, not fever unconsciousness. Clara and Silas stood together in the hallway. "That was kind," Clara said softly. "What you offered him." It was practical. But Silas's slight smile suggested otherwise. "Good men are hard to find. Why would I let them go when I could invest in their loyalty instead? Most employers wouldn't see it that way. Most employers are fools who think keeping people dependent makes them easier to control." Silas met her eyes. "I've learned that you build something lasting by giving people a reason to stay, by treating them fair and trusting them to do the same." Clara thought about his words, about everything they implied. "Is that what you're doing with me, building something lasting?" Silas was quiet for a moment. "I'm trying, if you'll let me." Before she could respond, Thomas emerged from Henry's room, rubbing exhaustion from his eyes. The moment dissolved into practical matters, schedules and meals, and making sure Henry continued to recover. But later, walking back to her cabin in the early morning light, Clara carried Silas's words with her. Building something lasting. If you'll let me. The question was whether she had the courage to let him, whether she could trust that this time this man, this chance, wouldn't end in loss like everything else she'd ever hoped for. She didn't have an answer yet, but for the first time, she wanted to find one. March softened into April, and with Henry's recovery came a shift in the ranch's rhythm. Clara noticed it in small ways at first. Silas appearing at the classroom, more often finding reasons to be wherever she was working, their conversations stretching longer than necessity required. She noticed it in herself, too, the way she listened for his footsteps, the way her heart lifted when he walked into a room, the way she caught herself watching his hands as he worked, remembering how they'd felt covering hers in the kitchen. Dangerous feelings, complicated feelings, the kind that could destroy everything she'd built if she let them, but also the kind that made her feel alive in a way she'd almost forgotten. "You're different lately," Ezra observed one evening as Clara tucked him and his brothers into bed. "You smile more." "Do I?" "Uh-huh. You used to look worried all the time. Now you just look... happy." Clara smoothed his hair back from his forehead. "I am happy, sweetheart. We have a good life here. Because of Mr. Harding." The question was too perceptive for a 9-year-old. Clara chose her words carefully. "Mr. Harding has been very good to us. He gave us a chance when no one else would." "I like him." Ezra's voice was sleepy but certain. "He's not like Pa was. Pa was always worried about the next thing, the next place. Mr. Harding just stays." Yes. Clara's throat tightened. He does. If you wanted to marry him, I think that would be okay. Clara's heart stopped. What? I see how you look at each other. I'm not stupid, Mama. Ezra yawned. And if you married him, we could stay here forever. We'd never have to leave. Sweetheart, I just wanted you to know it would be okay, if that's what you wanted. He was asleep before Clara could respond, leaving her sitting in the darkness with her son's blessing ringing in her ears. If that's what you wanted. Was it? Did she dare want something so enormous, so permanent, so terrifying? She was still asking herself that question when she walked outside and found Silas standing in the moonlight, looking toward her cabin like he'd been working up the courage to knock. Clara, his voice was rough. I know. She moved to stand beside him. I couldn't sleep either. They stood in silence for a moment, the night stretching around them. I've been thinking, Silas said finally, about what I started to tell you, in the kitchen before Henry's fever spiked. I remember. I should have finished, should have said what I meant instead of dancing around it. He turned to face her, but I was scared. Still am, if I'm honest. Scared of what? Of wanting something I can't have, of hoping for something and watching it slip away, He stopped, took a breath. Of loving you and losing you the way I lost Maggie. Clara felt the word hit her chest like a physical blow. Loving. He'd said loving. Silas, let me finish, please. He stepped closer. I've spent 16 years convincing myself I didn't need this, didn't need someone to come home to, didn't need a family beyond the one I've built with hired hands and neighbors. I was wrong. His hand came up to cup her face, gentle and trembling. I need you, Clara, not as an employee, not as a teacher for the ranch children. I need you because when you're in the room, I feel like I can breathe again. Because when I think about the future, you're in it. Because somewhere in the past 4 months, you stopped being someone I helped and became someone I can't imagine living without. Clara's eyes filled with tears. I'm scared too. I know. Will died and everything fell apart. I spent 8 months not knowing if my children would survive. I came here with nothing, and you gave us everything, and I keep waiting for it to be taken away. It won't be. You can't promise that. No. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. But I can promise that I'll spend every day trying to make it true. I can promise that I'll be here not chasing the next thing, not looking for something better. Just here, with you, building something that lasts. Clara thought about Ezra's words. He just stays. She thought about everything she'd lost, everything she'd feared, everything she'd stopped believing she deserved. And she thought about this man, this quiet, steady man, who'd offered her dignity when she had nothing, who'd defended her against a minister's poison, who'd stayed through every crisis and emerged stronger for it. Yes, she whispered. Silas went still. Yes. Yes. To whatever you're asking, to whatever comes next. Yes. He kissed her, then gentle at first, then deeper, and Clara felt 16 years of his loneliness and 8 months of her fear dissolve into something new, something that felt like hope. When they finally pulled apart, Silas pressed his forehead against hers. I want to do this right, court you properly, give you time to be sure. I'm sure. Clara. I'm sure, she repeated. I've been sure for weeks. I was just too scared to admit it. He kissed her again, and this time Clara kissed him back with everything she had, all her fear and all her hope and all her desperate, impossible wanting. Mama! They broke apart to find Ezra standing in the cabin doorway, his brothers peering around him with sleepy curiosity. I told you it would be okay, Ezra said with 9-year-old satisfaction. See, I was right. Clara laughed, actually laughed, the sound surprising her with its lightness. Yes, sweetheart, you were right. Silas knelt down to the boy's level, his expression serious. I want to ask you something, all 3 of you. I want to marry your mother, but I won't do it unless you're willing to have me as your pa. So I'm asking, would that be all right with you? Sam and Ike looked at Ezra, waiting for their older brother's verdict. Ezra studied Silas with the same serious gaze he'd inherited from his father. You'll stay, no matter what. You won't leave us. I'll stay. No matter what. I swear it. And you'll take care of Mama. Make sure she doesn't have to be scared anymore. That's the plan. Ezra nodded slowly. Then yes, we'd like that. We'd like to have a pay who stays. Silas held out his hand, and Ezra shook it solemnly. Then Sam rushed forward to hug Silas's leg, and Ike followed, and suddenly the quiet rancher was surrounded by 3 boys who'd been waiting their whole lives for someone who wouldn't leave. Clara watched with tears streaming down her face, her heart so full she thought it might burst. This was what second chances looked like. Not dramatic rescue, not fairy tale endings, just 2 broken people choosing to build something together, and 3 children learning that family could be chosen as well as born. They announced their engagement the next day. Mrs. Brennan cried actual tears from the woman who Clara had never seen show anything softer than grudging approval. Old Joe shook Silas's hand and told him it was about damn time. The ranch families celebrated like it was Christmas come early, but not everyone was pleased. Word reached Reverend Crane within the week, and if Clara thought his previous attacks had been vicious, they were nothing compared to what came next. He's telling people you seduced Silas for his money, Maddie reported grimly, saying you were planning this from the beginning, that you're a gold digger who trapped a good man with your sob story and your pretty face. Clara felt sick. That's not... Of course it's not true. Anyone with eyes can see what's between you two is real, but Crane's not interested in truth. He's interested in control, and you just took something he thought he could use against you and turned it into something beautiful. He can't stand that. What do? We fight. Silas appeared in the kitchen doorway, his jaw set hard. We fight back, and we don't let some small-minded fool destroy what we're building. How? By getting married. Soon. In front of the whole community. By showing everyone that we're not ashamed, not hiding, not backing down. His eyes met Clara's. If you're willing. I'm willing. But Silas, won't that just make things worse? Give Crane more ammunition. It'll make things clear. Right now people are confused. They hear Crane's poison and they don't know what to believe. But if we stand up in front of everyone and say, this is real, this is right, this is forever, that's harder to argue with. He moved closer, took her hands. I was going to wait. Do this properly. Court you for months before proposing. But Clara, I don't want to wait. I don't want to give Crane time to poison more minds. I want to marry you now this month and show the whole world that what we have is worth fighting for. Clara looked at this man who'd offered her everything and asked for nothing except the chance to love her. Then let's get married, she said. Let's show them all. The wedding was set for the last Saturday of April. 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to prepare to plan to prove to the whole community that what Clara and Silas had built was real. But Reverend Crane wasn't finished. The first sign came on Sunday morning when Clara took the boys to church. Half the pews that had been full the week before sat empty. The families who remained wouldn't meet her eyes. Crane's sermon was about Jezebel, about women who used their wiles to corrupt good men, about the importance of protecting the community from those who would destroy it from within. He never said Clara's name. He didn't have to. Ezra's hand tightened in hers. Mama, why is everyone looking at us like that? Because some people believe lies more easily than truth. Clara kept her voice steady, though her heart was pounding. We're going to sit here, listen politely, and then we're going home. But he's talking about you. I know, sweetheart, but running away would only prove him right. So we stay. They stayed. Through the whispers and the sideways glances, and Crane's poisonous words dripping like venom from the pulpit. They stayed until the final hymn, and then Clara gathered her sons and walked out with her head high. She made it to the wagon before her hands started shaking. Mrs. Weston. Clara turned to find a woman approaching Mrs. Patterson, the boarding house owner who'd turned them away that first desperate night. Mrs. Patterson. I wanted to say. The woman stopped, twisted her hands together. I wanted to say, I'm sorry. For what I did when you first came to town. For what's happening now. Clara felt something cold settle in her stomach. What's happening now? Crane's been making rounds, visiting families, suggesting that anyone who does business with Stonebrook Ranch is complicit in sin. Mrs. Patterson's voice dropped. The Hendersons are thinking of leaving. The Cartwrights too. He's told them their souls are in danger if they stay. That's ridiculous. I know, but he's convincing, and people are scared. Mrs. Patterson glanced around nervously. I just thought you should know. Before it's too late. She hurried away before Clara could respond, leaving her standing in the churchyard with her sons and a growing sense of dread. Silas was waiting when they returned to the ranch. One look at Clara's face told him everything. What happened? Crane's escalating. He's trying to convince the ranch families to leave, telling them their souls are in danger. Silas's expression darkened. He's what? Mrs. Patterson warned me. The Hendersons and Cartwrights are considering it. Like hell they are. Silas was already moving toward the barn. I'm going to talk to them, now. Silas, wait. Clara caught his arm. If you go in angry, you'll only make it worse. They're scared. They need reassurance, not confrontation. They need to know that man is lying through his teeth. They need to know we're not going to abandon them. That's different. Clara held his gaze. Let me come with you. Let me talk to the families while you handle the men. We'll cover more ground. Silas stared at her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Together then. Together. They spent the afternoon visiting every family on the ranch. Clara sat with the women, listened to their fears, answered their questions with honesty and patience. Silas met with the men, reminded them of everything the ranch had provided, everything they'd built together. By evening, the immediate crisis had passed. No one was leaving. But the damage had been done, doubt had been planted, and doubt was harder to uproot than weeds. This isn't over, Clara said quietly, as they walked back toward the main house. Crane won't stop just because we pushed back. I know. What do we do? Silas was quiet for a moment. We get married. Publicly. In front of everyone who matters. And we make it clear that no amount of poison is going to change what we're building here. And if people still believe him, then we prove them wrong, day by day, action by action, the same way we've been proving ourselves all along. He stopped, turned to face her. Clara, I won't let him win. I won't let him take this from us. Neither will I. She meant it. Every word. The second week of April brought an unexpected visitor. Clara was in the schoolhouse reviewing lessons for the next day when a shadow fell across the doorway. She looked up expecting Silas or Maddie. Instead, she found Marcus Weston. Her brother-in-law stood in the doorway, hat in his hands, looking smaller somehow than he had that terrible night when he'd refused to open his door. Clara. Marcus. She didn't stand, didn't move. What are you doing here? I came to... He stopped, shifted his weight. I heard about what's happening. With the minister, the things he's saying about you. And you thought you'd come see the spectacle for yourself? No, I came to apologize. Clara felt her hands clench on the desk. Apologize. For turning you away. For leaving you and the boys in the cold. Marcus's voice cracked. For being a coward when you needed family. Why now? It's been 5 months. Because I've been ashamed. Every day since it happened, I've been ashamed. But I told myself it was too late to fix it. That you'd never forgive me. That it was easier to just pretend it never happened. He took a step into the schoolhouse. Then I heard about Crane. About what he's doing to you. And I realized that staying silent made me just as bad as him. Worse maybe. Because I'm your family. Will's brother. I should have been there from the beginning. Clara stared at him, this man who had closed his door while her children shivered in the snow. The anger she expected to feel was there but muted somehow, worn smooth by months of building something new. What do you want, Marcus? To help, if you'll let me. He twisted his hat in his hands. I've been talking to people in town, telling them the truth about you and Silas, about what really happened that night and everything since. I can't undo what I did, but I can try to counter what Crane's spreading. Why should I trust you? You shouldn't. I haven't earned it. Marcus met her eyes for the first time. But Will trusted me. Enough to send you to me when he knew he was dying. I failed that trust once. I don't want to fail it again. Clara thought about her husband, about the letter still folded in her pocket, about the brother Will had believed would do the right thing. Silas will want to talk to you. I figured. He may not be as willing to forgive as I am. I don't expect forgiveness, just a chance to make it right. Clara stood slowly. Then come with me. And Marcus, if this is some kind of trick, if you're working with Crane or trying to cause more trouble, it's not. I swear on Will's grave it's not. She believed him. Maybe she was foolish too, but she believed him. Silas's reaction to Marcus was exactly what Clara expected, cold fury barely contained behind a mask of civility. You've got nerve showing up here. Silas's voice was ice. After what you did. I know. Do you have any idea what she went through that night? What those boys went through? They could have died, Marcus. Frozen to death in a Colorado winter because you were too much of a coward to open your door. I know. Marcus didn't flinch from the condemnation. And I'll carry that shame for the rest of my life. But I'm here now. I want to help. Why should I believe that? Because I'm the only one who can counter Crane's narrative. Marcus's voice steadied. He's telling people Clara manipulated you, that she planned this from the beginning. But I can tell them the truth, that she came to me first, that I turned her away, that she had no plan except desperate hope that family would help her. And you think that helps? I think it shows that she didn't target you, that she tried everything else first, that whatever's between you now grew from honest circumstances, not scheming. Marcus looked between them. People know me in town. I've lived here for 8 years. If I stand up and say what really happened, they'll listen. Clara watched Silas process this, watched the war between anger and pragmatism play out on his face. You hurt her, Silas said finally, his voice low. You hurt those boys. I don't forgive that. I'm not asking you to. But if you can help, if you can make this right, then we'll give you the chance. Silas stepped closer, his eyes hard. But Marcus, if you're lying, if this is some kind of game, I will end you. Understand? I understand. Good. Silas turned away. The wedding's in 2 weeks. You've got until then to prove you're worth trusting. Marcus proved it. Over the following days, he moved through Willow Creek like a man on a mission. He talked to shopkeepers and farmers, to families who'd known Will, to anyone who would listen. He told the truth, not the pretty version, but the ugly one. How he'd turned away his brother's widow. How she'd had nowhere to go. How Silas Harding had done what family wouldn't. The tide began to turn. People are talking, Maddie reported midway through the second week. Different talk now, about how Crane's been lying, about how Marcus confirmed everything you said, about how maybe they judged you too quick. It's not enough, Clara said quietly. Crane still has supporters. He always will. Some people need someone to hate, but the middle ground's shifting. That's what matters. Clara hoped she was right. The third week of April brought the final crisis. Clara woke to pounding on the cabin door, Maddie's voice urgent in the pre-dawn darkness. Clara, wake up. It's Silas. He's sick. Bad. Clara was out of bed before the words fully registered, pulling on clothes, her heart hammering against her ribs. What happened? Don't know. He was fine yesterday. Woke up this morning burning with fever, coughing hard. Can't catch his breath. Fever, coughing, can't breathe. Clara's blood turned to ice. Get the doctor, now! She was already running toward the main house. And keep the boys at the cabin. Don't let them come near. She found Silas in his bed, his face flushed and sheened with sweat, his breathing labored and rattling. He tried to speak when she entered, but coughing consumed him before he could form words. "Don't talk." Clara pressed her hand to his forehead, burning. "Just breathe. I'm here. Clara." His voice was barely a whisper. "The wedding can wait. You need to focus on getting well." "Don't want to leave you." "You're not leaving me." She blinked back tears, forced her voice to stay steady. "You promised you'd stay. You don't get to break that promise because you caught a fever." The doctor arrived an hour later, examined Silas with grim efficiency, and delivered a diagnosis that made Clara's knees buckle. "Pneumonia. Caught early, but it's moving fast. His lungs are filling with fluid." The doctor met Clara's eyes. "I won't lie to you, Mrs. Weston. The next few days will be critical. If the fever doesn't break, if his breathing gets worse—" He didn't finish. He didn't have to. "What do we do?" Clara asked. "Keep him cool. Force fluids when he's conscious. Watch for blood in the cough, that's a bad sign. And pray." "I don't need prayer. I need him to live." The doctor packed his bag. Sometimes those are the same thing. After he left, Clara sat beside Silas's bed and took his hand. His skin was paper dry, burning hot, his fingers twitching with fever dreams. 16 years ago, Silas had lost his wife to illness while he was far away, unable to help. Clara understood now why that guilt had never left him. Because sitting here watching someone you loved fight for breath, knowing there was nothing you could do but wait, it was its own kind of torture. "You listen to me, Silas Harding." She squeezed his hand hard. "I didn't survive everything I survived just to lose you now. I didn't learn to hope again just to have it taken away. So you fight. You hear me? You fight." His eyes opened, fever bright but aware. "Bossy woman." "That's right, and you're stuck with me. So don't you dare give up." A ghost of a smile crossed his cracked lips. "Yes, ma'am." He slept after that, and Clara began her vigil. The first day was bad. The second was worse. Silas's fever climbed despite every effort to bring it down. His cough produced blood-tinged mucus that terrified Clara every time she saw it. He drifted in and out of consciousness, sometimes lucid, sometimes lost in delirium. On the second night, he called out for Maggie. Clara was there, holding his hand when the name left his lips. "Maggie, don't go. Please don't go." She didn't flinch, didn't pull away. This was the ghost he'd been fighting for 16 years, and Clara understood that some battles had to be fought alone. "It's Clara," she said gently. "Maggie's gone Silas. But I'm here. I'm right here." His eyes opened unfocused. "Clara." "Yes." "I thought—" He coughed, winced with pain. "I thought I was dying. Thought I'd lost you like I lost her." "You haven't lost me. You're not dying." Clara pressed her lips to his burning forehead. "You're going to get through this. We both are. If I don't—" "Stop." "Clara, if I don't—" "I said stop." Her voice broke. "You don't get to say goodbye. You don't get to give up. We haven't had enough time yet. We haven't gotten married. We haven't watched the boys grow up. We haven't—" She was crying now, tears streaming down her face. "We haven't had any of it yet, and you don't get to leave before we do." Silas lifted his hand. It took visible effort and touched her wet cheek. "I love you." "Then prove it. Stay alive. Trying. Try harder." On the third night, the fever broke. Clara was dozing in the chair beside his bed when she felt his hand squeeze hers. She opened her eyes to find him watching her, his gaze clear for the first time in days. "Hey." His voice was rough, weak, but present. "Hey yourself." Clara pressed her palm to his forehead. "Cool. Finally cool." "You scared me." "Scared myself." He tried to sit up, failed, let her help him. "How long?" 3 days. "The wedding?" "Postponed, obviously." "No." Silas shook his head weakly. "Don't want to wait. Don't want to give Crane more time to poison people against us. Don't want—" He coughed, but it was clearer now, less desperate. "Don't want to waste another day not being your husband. Silas, you can barely sit up. Then we'll do it here, in this room, with whoever can witness." His hand found hers, held tight despite his weakness. "I almost died, Clara. I know what that feels like now. And all I could think about was you, about all the time I wasted being careful, being scared, being too stubborn to just say what I felt." He pulled her closer. "I don't want to be careful anymore. I don't want to wait for the perfect moment. I just want to marry you. Today, now, before anything else tries to take this from us." Clara looked at this man, pale, weak, still fighting off the remnants of an illness that had nearly killed him, and felt something shift inside her. Okay. We'll get married today. Here. Now." She leaned down, pressed her forehead to his. "But you're not allowed to die at your own wedding. That's my one condition." "Deal." They were married that afternoon in Silas's bedroom with Maddie and old Joe as witnesses, the three boys crowded at the foot of the bed, and Marcus Weston standing in the doorway like he wasn't sure he belonged. The ceremony was simple. No Minister Crane certainly wouldn't have agreed, and they wouldn't have asked. Old Joe performed the honors reading from a Bible he'd carried since the war between the states. "Do you, Silas Abraham Harding, take this woman to be your wife?" "I do." Silas's voice was stronger than it had been all day, as if the words themselves gave him strength. "And do you, Clara Josephine Weston, take this man to be your husband?" "I do." "Then by the power vested in me by nobody official but by this community and these witnesses and the good Lord above, I pronounce you husband and wife." Silas kissed her then, soft and gentle and full of promise, while the boys cheered and Maddie wiped her eyes, and even Marcus smiled. "Mrs. Harding," Silas murmured against her lips. "Mr. Harding." Clara smiled back. "Don't die. Wouldn't dream of it." Silas's recovery was slow but steady. The doctor came every other day for the first week, then weekly after that, each visit bringing better news than the last. By the second week of May, he was out of bed. By the third, he was walking the ranch grounds stubborn as ever despite Clara's protests. "You should be resting," she told him for the 100th time, watching him check fence lines from the porch. "I've been resting for a month. Any more rest and I'll forget how to work. You almost died. Almost." He turned to face her, that quiet smile she'd come to love softening his weathered features. "But I didn't. And I've got too much to live for now to spend it lying in bed." He crossed the distance between them, pulled her close. Clara let herself lean into his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. Still here. Still alive. Still hers. "The hands are talking," he murmured against her hair. "About what?" "About how soft I've gotten since I married you. How I smile too much. How I don't bark orders like I used to." Clara laughed. "And is that true?" "Probably." He kissed the top of her head. "Don't tell anyone. Ruin my reputation." The ranch had changed in the weeks since the wedding. Not in any obvious way. The work still got done, the cattle still needed tending. The rhythms of daily life continued as they always had. But there was something lighter in the air now. Something hopeful that hadn't been there before. The families had stayed. Every single one. Whatever doubts Crane had planted had been uprooted by Marcus's truth-telling and the quiet example of Clara and Silas's commitment to each other. And Crane himself had gone quiet. Not silent, he still preached his sermons, still cast his disapproving glances whenever Clara and Silas came to town. But the fire had gone out of his campaign. Without fuel to feed it, even the most determined hatred eventually burns itself out. "Think he's given up?" Clara asked one afternoon as they rode back from town together. "Men like Crane don't give up. They just wait for another opportunity." Silas's jaw tightened. "But he's lost this battle. People see the truth now. They see what we've built. Hard to argue with that." "So we won." "We didn't win. We just stopped losing." He glanced at her. The fight's not over, Clara. It never is. But we're stronger now than we were. And we'll keep getting stronger as long as we keep building. Building. That was what they did day after day, choice after choice. Building a life, a family, a future that no one could take away, because it was founded on something more solid than circumstance. It was founded on trust. On work. On the daily decision to show up and keep trying no matter what. June arrived with warmth and wildflowers, the Colorado summer painting, everything in shades of green and gold. Clara's school year ended with a celebration that drew every family on the ranch and half the town besides. The children performed readings they'd practiced for weeks. The youngest Cartwright, who couldn't recognize letters 6 months ago, stood up and read a full paragraph from McGuffey's Reader. Daniel Henderson, who'd once questioned Clara's right to teach, gave a speech about what education meant to him in his future. Clara watched with tears in her eyes, feeling the weight of everything she'd accomplished pressing against her chest. "You did this." Silas stood beside her, his voice quiet. "All of this. We did this, together." "No." He shook his head. "This part was you. The teaching, the patience, the belief that these children could become more than what they were. That was all you, Clara. I just gave you a place to do it." "That's not nothing." "Maybe. But what you've given them, what you've given me, that's everything." After the celebration ended, and the families had gone home and the boys were in bed, Clara and Silas sat together on the porch of what was now their shared home. The main house. Their house. "I need to tell you something," Clara said quietly. Silas turned to look at her, a question in his dark eyes. "I'm pregnant." The silence that followed was so complete that Clara could hear the crickets singing in the grass, could hear her own heart pounding in her ears. Then Silas made a sound half laugh, half sob, and pulled her into his arms so tight she could barely breathe. "Are you sure?" "The doctor confirmed it this morning. I'm about 2 months along." 2 months. He pulled back his eyes, searching her face. "You knew. When I was sick, you knew." "I suspected. I wasn't sure until today." "Clara," his voice cracked. "A baby. We're having a baby. Are you happy?" "Happy doesn't begin to cover it." He kissed her soft and wondering. "Terrified. Overwhelmed. Grateful beyond words. But yes, underneath all of that, happy." "I was afraid," Clara admitted. "After everything with Maggie, I was afraid this would bring back all that pain." "It does." Silas was honest as always. "I'd be lying if I said it didn't. But it's different this time. I'm different. I'm here. I'm not going anywhere. And whatever happens—" He stopped, swallowed hard. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together. I won't leave you, Clara. Not for cattle drives, not for money, not for anything. I learned that lesson the hard way. I won't make the same mistake twice." Clara believed him. After everything they'd been through, she finally completely believed him. The news spread through the ranch like wildfire. Maddie cried again. The woman who never cried seemed to do nothing but cry lately. Old Joe shook Silas's hand and told him that Maggie would have been happy for him. The Caldwell brothers started a betting pool on whether it would be a boy or a girl. And the 3 boys, Ezra, Sam, and Ike, had their own reactions. "Does this mean we're getting a real brother or sister?" Sam asked, his 6-year-old face scrunched in concentration. "Not just a half one." "There's no such thing as half in this family," Clara said firmly. "Brothers and sisters are brothers and sisters no matter how they come to be. But will the baby be Mr. Harding's? I mean Pa's." Ezra's question was more complex, touching on things he was still trying to understand. Silas knelt down to the boy's level. "This baby will be mine, yes, but you 3, you're mine too. I chose you same as I chose your mama. Blood doesn't make family, choice does, and I chose all of you." "So we're all Hardings now?" Ike asked. "If you want to be." The boys looked at each other, that silent communication passing between them that Clara had come to recognize. "We want to be," Ezra said. "We want to be Hardings, if that's okay." "It's more than okay." Silas's voice was rough. "It's exactly what I was hoping you'd say." The adoption papers were filed the following week. Ezra Daniel Harding, Samuel Robert Harding, Isaac Thomas Harding, 3 boys who'd come to Colorado with nothing, who'd been turned away by blood family, who'd found their way to a man willing to choose them. 3 boys who finally had a father who stayed. Summer deepened into August, and Clara's pregnancy progressed without complication. The doctor visited monthly, pronounced her healthy, marveled at her strength, given everything she'd been through. Most women in your situation would have broken, he said during one visit. Lost a husband, traveled 300 miles with 3 children, nearly froze to death, rebuilt everything from nothing. And now this. He shook his head. You're made of stronger stuff than most, Mrs. Harding. I had help. Clara glanced out the window to where Silas was working with the boys, teaching Ezra to rope, while Sam and Ike cheered them on. I had a lot of help. Help doesn't explain all of it. You have to be willing to accept help, willing to trust. After what you've been through, that's the hardest part. He was right. It was the hardest part. And some days Clara still struggled with it. Still caught herself waiting for disaster, for loss, for the moment when everything would fall apart. But those days were getting fewer. The fear was getting quieter. And the life she was building with Silas was getting stronger. One evening in late August, Clara found herself standing at the window of the main house, watching the sun set over the ranch. Her hand rested on her swelling belly, feeling the flutter of new life beneath her palm. Silas came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, rested his chin on her shoulder. What are you thinking about? That night in Willow Creek. Clara leaned back against him. Standing outside the general store with the boys, $18 in my pocket, no idea what was going to happen next. I remember. You looked like you were calculating survival. I was. I was trying to figure out how to keep my children alive through the night. That was as far as I could think. One night at a time. And now, Clara smiled. Now I think about years, decades, watching the boys grow up. Watching this baby grow up. Growing old with you on this ranch we've built together. But that's a lot of thinking. I have a lot to think about now. She turned in his arms, faced him. You gave me that, Silas. A future I could actually plan for instead of just survive. You gave yourself that. I just provided the opportunity. You keep saying that. Because it's true. He cupped her face in his hands. Clara, you walked into my life with nothing except 3 children and a willingness to work. Everything you have now, you earned. Every bit of respect, every dollar saved, every relationship built, that was you. All I did was see what you were capable of and give you space to prove it. That's not nothing? No. He kissed her forehead. But it's not everything either. You're the everything. You and those boys and this baby. You're what makes all of it worth building. The baby came in early October, on a morning when the aspen trees had turned gold and the air carried the first bite of approaching winter. Clara labored through the night with Silas at her side, refusing to leave despite Maddie's protests about propriety and men's places in childbirth. I wasn't there for Maggie. He said, his voice tight with fear and determination. I won't make that mistake again. I'm staying. So he stayed. Held her hand through the contractions. Wiped her forehead when she sweated. Talked her through the worst of it with quiet words of encouragement that steadied her more than she could say. And when the baby finally came, when the midwife placed the squalling infant in Clara's arms, Silas broke down completely. A daughter. He could barely speak through his tears. We have a daughter. Clara looked at the tiny face, red and wrinkled and utterly perfect. She needs a name. I was thinking, if you're willing. Silas swallowed hard. I was thinking we could name her Hope. Hope. Because that's what you gave me, what you gave all of us. The courage to hope again when we'd forgotten how. Clara felt her own tears fall dropping onto her daughter's downy head. Hope Harding. It's perfect. She's perfect. Silas touched the baby's tiny hand, watched her fingers curl around his rough finger. They're all perfect. Our children. Our family. our life. It wasn't easy getting here. No. But nothing worth having ever is. The boys met their sister later that morning, crowding around the bed with varying degrees of awe and concern. "She's so small," Sam whispered. "She'll get bigger," Ezra assured him with 9-year-old authority. "Can I hold her?" Ike asked, already reaching out. "When you're sitting down with help," Clara said. "She's delicate." They took turns, each boy cradling their baby sister with surprising gentleness. Watching them, Clara felt something settle into place, the final piece of a puzzle she hadn't even known she was solving. This was her family, not the one she'd been born into, not the one she'd married into the first time, but the one she'd built. Choice by choice, day by day, trust by trust. Will had been wrong about Marcus, but he'd been right about one thing. He'd told her to go to family when he died, and she had. She'd just found a different kind of family than either of them expected. "Mama," Ezra's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Are you happy?" Clara looked at her eldest son, this serious boy who'd grown so much in the past year, who'd carried too much responsibility, and found a place where he could finally just be a child. "Yes, sweetheart. I'm happy." "Good." He nodded solemnly. "Because I think Pa would want you to be happy. Our first Pa, I mean. I think he'd be glad you found someone who stays." Clara's throat tightened. "I think so too. And I'm glad." Ezra's voice was quiet but certain. "I'm glad we came here, even though it was hard at first, even though Uncle Marcus turned us away and we didn't know what was going to happen. I'm glad because it brought us to Pa Silas and Stonebrook and home." Home. Clara pulled him close, this boy who understood more than any child should have to understand. "Me too, sweetheart. Me too." Autumn deepened into winter, the second winter Clara had spent at Stonebrook Ranch. But this one was different. This one was warm and full and safe, in ways the first one had never been. Silas had officially adopted the boys. The ranch was thriving under the partnership arrangements he'd made with the Caldwell brothers. Clara's school had grown to include children from neighboring ranches, her reputation as a teacher spreading far beyond Willow Creek. And baby Hope grew stronger every day, filling the house with her cries and her coos, and the particular magic that infants bring to any home. On Christmas morning, the whole family gathered in the main house, Clara and Silas, the 3 boys, baby Hope Maddie, and old Joe the Caldwell brothers. Even Marcus, who'd become a regular visitor and was slowly rebuilding the trust he'd broken. The tree was decorated with ornaments the children had made. The table was laden with food. And everywhere Clara looked, she saw evidence of the life she'd built from the ashes of the one she'd lost. "Speech." Old Joe called out, raising his glass of cider. "The boss needs to make a speech." Silas stood looking uncomfortable with the attention, but willing to endure it. "I'm not much for speeches," he began. "Never have been, but I've got a few things to say, so bear with me." He looked around the room at the faces of people who'd become family in every way that mattered. 2 years ago, I was the man with a ranch and nothing else. I'd spent 16 years building walls around myself, convincing myself that work was enough, that land was enough, that I didn't need anything more than what I had. His eyes found Clara's. Then a woman showed up with 3 boys and $18 and more courage than sense, and she knocked down every wall I'd built without even trying, just by being herself. Just by working hard and loving her children and refusing to give up no matter what life threw at her. Clara felt tears prick her eyes. "I used to think second chances were something you got once and then they were gone. But I've learned different. Second chances are something you build day by day, choice by choice. They're not given to you. They're earned, and they're worth every bit of fear and doubt and hard work it takes to get them." He raised his glass. "To family. Not the one we're born into, but the one we choose, the one we fight for, the one we build together, brick by brick, promise by promise, until it's stronger than anything that tries to tear it down." "To family," the room echoed. Later that night, after the celebration had ended and the guests had gone home and the children were in bed, Clara and Silas stood together on the porch watching snow fall gently over the ranch. Happy? He asked the same question he asked her every night now. More than I ever thought possible. Good. He pulled her close. Because that's all I want. For the rest of my life, that's all I want. To make you happy. To keep you safe. To build this life with you whatever comes. Clara leaned into him, feeling his warmth against the cold, feeling the steady beat of his heart beneath her cheek. She thought about that night a year ago, standing outside the general store with her boys, watching a stranger cross the street, wondering if accepting his help would be the worst mistake of her life. It wasn't a mistake. It was the beginning. The beginning of a home, a family, a love that grew stronger every day, because it was built on trust, instead of desperation on partnership, instead of rescue on the daily choice to show up and keep trying no matter what. I love you, she said softly. I love you too. Silas kissed the top of her head. Forever. Forever. It was a big word, a scary word, a word that promised things no one could guarantee. But standing there in the falling snow with her husband's arms around her and her children sleeping safe inside and her whole life stretching out before her like an open road, Clara finally believed it. Not because forever was certain, nothing was certain, but because she'd found someone worth building forever with. Someone who stayed. Someone who kept his promises. Someone who understood that the strongest foundations weren't built on romance or rescue, but on respect and work and the daily decision to choose each other over and over again. That was enough. That was everything. Clara Harding closed her eyes and let herself rest against the man she loved. The snow falling around them like a blessing, the ranch spreading out in the darkness like a promise kept. She was home. Finally, completely, irreversibly home. And she was never leaving.